This morning we're going to be looking at resentment, how to deal with resentment, what to do about it if you're willing to even try. First of all, what does resentment mean? Where does it come from? I like studying etymologies, the roots of words, where they start. And it turns out resentment comes from two Latin words. One of them is sentire, which means to feel. The other one is which means again. So the translation literally is to feel again. And the nature of resentment is just that. We relive the experience. Whatever took place, something bothered us, something offended us. It might be a person, a circumstance. But it's not so much about the event itself. And this is what's similar to trauma. Resentment is not so much about the event itself, but how we internalize it. And trauma means a wound. It's like when a person is wounded, they haven't healed from something bad that happened to them. Resentment, I think, is very similar, and sometimes they're combined. I know in my own life, a lot of my resentment was linked to the trauma. So, to give you an example, I resented my father because he abused me. I resented my mother because she abandoned me and because she didn't bond with me. So, my resentment and my trauma went hand in hand. When I began my recovery journey, this was important for me to address. I don't know about you all, but I've noticed that it's very common with people who struggle with addiction, whether it's alcohol, drugs, or any other behavioral addiction. I have found that resentment is a common thread that we all kind of share. It has been said, I don't know by who, but I just remember this quote, that bitterness is the poison we drink wishing others would die. That's the nature of resentment. For some reason, it tends to cause more damage to the person who experiences it than those who it is directed toward. When I thought about forgiveness, I was resistant to that idea because I believe that I was wronged by the people I resented. And forgiveness for me, it seemed like a gift, like giving them something that they didn't deserve. And so I didn't want to hear none of that. I didn't want to talk about forgiveness. I didn't want to consider it. And I'm not here to tell you that you need to forgive anybody else. In fact, I wouldn't say that. You don't have to forgive anyone. If they've done you wrong and you have a resentment, it's not my place to tell you that you need to forgive them. You've been offended. If you've been offended, you're the one that's in the position of making that determination for yourself. Do you want to forgive or don't you? That's up to you. It's entirely up to you. But I would like to give you some ideas about forgiveness that might change your perception about what it is. This is what helped me. So forgiveness does not mean to give anything to anyone else. What helped me was to look at it in a different way. And so I wrote up on the board a couple of examples. Forgiveness, when it came to me letting go of my resentments, I understood it better and it made more sense to me when I realized that it could be as simple as canceling a debt. Like somebody owes you money, and instead of you hounding them and exhausting yourself and stressing yourself out trying to get that money that they owe you, you just say, you know what? I'm not going to worry about it anymore. I'm not going to fuck with them, right? Yeah, I'm not going to fuck with them anymore, right? They ain't getting another penny out of me. But I'm not going to hound them for that money. I'm going to let it go. Cancel the debt. Another way is dismissing a charge. For those of you who have been familiar with the court systems, I know I have. I wish this would have happened to me. It never did. But I could imagine it's very relieving if you get to experience that. But on this topic, when it came to it, if I knew that I was entitled to justice, let's say, but that justice might never come, it might be best for me to just drop the case and move on with my life. Another way of looking at it is foregoing your right to retribution or restitution, which is very similar. All those three concepts are very similar. It's like you are in a position to demand what is owed to you. But the reality is, you might not ever get that. I had to admit that to myself. In fact, it was unrealistic for me to think in terms of somehow, some way, what was done wrong could be corrected. It can't happen. Some of the things that I held on to were just tragic. It was just very unfortunate. It was brutal, and it was wrong, and it was unjust, and there's just no way I could ever erase it. I can't go back in time and change it up. Even if my parents were to admit the wrongs that they did and ask for my forgiveness, or if other people who betrayed me were to apologize sincerely, it's not going to change what happened. There were people that I resented that died, and my resentment didn't die with them. Sometimes we can hold on to things long after the event took place, and there is no remedy other than us being willing to lay it down and put it to rest. Because this is an internal thing. And what's fascinating to me about this is I don't believe that any human being is inherently resentful. I've never seen a small child who is resentful. Children are beautiful examples of what humans have in terms of our potential to be pure and loving and forgiving. Small children show that. They're like little angels in the world. I love kids and just the way they are so capable of moving on. You see them doing that with each other all the time. They play and then they fight and then they're back to playing again and they're best friends. And they make friends easily with any other kid, perfect strangers, and they just start playing and acting like they know each other. And even if they're in families that are dysfunctional, and there might be parents who are not present or who are abusive even, children are so willing to see beyond that stuff and just love in an unconditional, pure way.
They're resilient.
They're very resilient.
They bounce back from just about anything.
Mm-hmm.
But it's always good to know that some of us are those small children still, though.
Yeah.
They're still there.
The potential's there.
Yeah.
We all have that inner child. At some point in time, we were all that innocent and that pure. But something happens as we develop. And I view resentment as an invasive species of emotion that's not natural to humans, that somehow creeps its way into our hearts. And it could present even as young as the teenage years. I think that's when it starts to rear its ugly head. I think it becomes present when young people become more self-absorbed and feel more entitled to certain things. And it's not wrong to demand respect or consideration. But what happens is once resentment sets in and it becomes part of a person's psychological makeup, because this is a psychological thing. It starts in the mind. It's all about your perception and how you ruminate and how you turn things over in your mind. But once you start seeing yourself as a victim and as someone who's been slighted or wronged, and then it provokes this anger and this aggression within, that now you become vengeful and you want to extract blood. You want eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Or you might want to take 2 eyes for one of your eyes. Or the whole grill, even though you just got one tooth chipped. This is what happens to us. We become vicious, I think, in a way. And that's not how we were as kids. When we want to see other people suffer because we felt bad about something. 2 wrongs never makes a right. And I know that even if you get an opportunity to act out your vengeance, still doesn't make things better. It won't take away what was done. I like watching true crime, and I've seen people in courtrooms where the perpetrator of heinous crimes is being sentenced. And the families of the victim will stand there, and not always, but sometimes they'll state that they forgive that person. And it's not for the sake of the offender. It's for the sake of the family, for that individual that is already suffering with the tragic loss. They are willing to forgive simply to give themselves that peace. They'd rather have that peace than to continue to live in that hatred, because it's exhausting. Anger, resentment, hatred, all those negative emotions, they drain the life out of you. And I think it's a wise position to take. It's not something that I could tell you, you should do this, you have to do this. I'm just stating the facts. The reality is people who are more willing to forgive, or at least let things go and move on and move past it, they tend to be healthier, more well-attuned individuals. I think it is wise to do that.
I'm just thinking when you said that about a contemporary example of the murder of Charlie Kirk. It was like a week later, his wife said, "If there's something I could convey to that man that did that, I forgive you." And I'm just like, that's insane. That's crazy. But you're right. I mean, she immediately took the power away from whatever sort of bitterness would have started to fester, and grow.
Yeah, that's a good point. Now, I wouldn't say that you should forgive. I'm not going to tell you to do that. But I will ask you this question. If you're not willing to forgive, how's it working out for you? You feel better? Is your life better? Do you enjoy healthier, closer relationships and bonds with the other people in your life? Do you feel good about yourself in general? Here's the thing that I recognized too in my early recovery was that I had a lot of resentments against a lot of people and institutions and concepts and ideologies and just all this stuff. Even God was on my 4th step when I did my inventory. Because I was like, that's the initial instigator of everything that's wrong in the world. Right? The one who created it. It's all God's fault, right? He created the devil that's wreaking havoc on this earth, right? All the problems. I had a lot of things I could blame on other people and other stuff. But, primarily I had the most resentment against myself. And I think this is why I was so easy to blame other people and hate other people, because I was quick to hate myself. I was very hard on myself, unforgiving of myself. And usually from what you carry within is what you demonstrate toward others. And I used to be a very bitter person. And I had a short fuse. And I could be explosive, and it was like spontaneous combustion. And sometimes people that didn't even deserve for me to act that way towards them were on the receiving end of my fury because I had compiled so much. I was like a ticking bomb. And I would suppress and suppress and suppress, and then one little tiny little infraction would just set me off, and I'd go over the top and yelling and cussing and sometimes resorting to violence. And I remember arguing with my significant others, and all my old relationships were toxic, and I wasn't always innocent. There were times when we'd argue and I I would go straight for the jugular. And I would, with my words, inflict damage that was irreversible. And I ruined a lot of relationships that way. I would attack my own family members. But it was because deep down inside, I was a very unhappy person. I had no peace within me. So I was unstable. And that manifested in my relationships and in society at large. I spent a lot of time in prison because I wasn't equipped to be a productive member of society. And being in prison in that environment, yeah, if you're that kind of an individual, you act like an animal, you're probably going to do very well in there because you're surrounded by that. So if you're in the jungle, yeah, that helps. But in the real world, with families, with coworkers, out in public, it's important to have some restraint, some self-control. And this is hard for me to adapt to because I was used to being in survival mode. And I had a lot of issues that I hadn't resolved. There were a lot of deep-set insecurities that I didn't want to admit. The reason why I was so angry and why I was so quick to resort to violence was because I was in constant fear. And because I felt vulnerable. The reason why I was so resistant to developing meaningful, close bonds with people is for the same reason. I was afraid of getting hurt. I felt vulnerable. I didn't know what to do with myself, so I didn't trust anyone else either. I came to believe that people can't be trusted because people can turn on you. And from that place of loneliness and sadness, it caused me a lot of depression. And I sought escape in the drugs and the alcohol and in the fake friends and in the fly-by-night relationships, which always continued to make that void even greater that was within me. I couldn't find the right thing to supplement what I was lacking. And this caused me to attempt suicide ultimately. So it brought me into treatment. And the way that I attempted suicide was a vengeful way. I stabbed myself in the neck.
Oh, wow.
And I was staring at myself in the mirror while I was doing this, and I was feeling good about it because it was like I was getting revenge on my worst enemy. That's where my emotions took me, ultimately. That was the logical conclusion. But when I entered treatment and I started to assess all of that and listening to other people who had gone before me, who had found success in their own recovery, and me being willing to follow their suggestions, this opened up a whole new world that I had not known existed. And it all began with me connecting with myself and seeing what was going on deep down inside of me. And this is why I'm able to be honest with you and tell you about the stuff, because now I look back and I can pinpoint all the areas of my life that needed to be addressed. And this was one of the main areas. The fact that I didn't think that it was possible for me to let go of the things that happened to me. And in that same way, I couldn't let go of the things that I did wrong either. Because at a certain point, you grow up and you realize that you're no longer the victim. Now you're traumatizing yourself. Now you're doing things that you know better you shouldn't be doing. And so now you don't like yourself because of the bad decisions you keep making. And so that just adds, and you're just stockpiling resentments against others, against yourself. And where is that ultimately going to take anybody? That's where it took me, what I just shared with you. And so in order for me to begin to process like my childhood trauma and the resentments that I carried from all of that, I had to first begin with myself and giving myself a pass and say, you know what, Daniel, I'm going to just drop all of this resentment that I have against myself. I'm just not going to hold myself to the fire anymore and have this unreasonable expectation of perfection, and I'm just going to allow myself to have some grace, at least to get better, to heal. And then it was from that point that I realized, well, if I was able to forgive myself, whom I hated more than anyone else, it wasn't as difficult for me to let go of the other things too. Because that was my primary target. I was my own worst enemy. There was nobody that I hated more than I hated myself. There was no one that had done me wrong more than I'd done myself wrong. I had a lot of charges against myself, but when I decided to make peace with myself, to reconcile with myself, that's when I was able to, from that point, transmit that same kind of grace towards others. And even though I don't talk to my father, and I might never speak to him again, I don't hate him today. Just this last holiday season, during the Christmas, right the week before Christmas, I went to spend a week with my mother, who's staying with my oldest sister. And I love my mom. But I just was never able to really bond with her. And she made a lot of bad choices that affected me early on. One of those was abandoning me and my sister to our father, who was an alcoholic, and he was very abusive in a lot of different ways. When I worked this program, the 12-step program of AA, in my early recovery, I processed all that stuff. I thought I did. And it's been almost 4 years now. I'm coming up on 4 years next month. And it hasn't really come up. I haven't really experienced anything, any residuals of the resentment that I had with my mom. But when I was there with her for that week, it started to come up again. Because I'm cooking her meals, I'm washing her dishes, I'm serving her, I'm doing stuff for her. And then it crossed my mind. I'm like, why am I doing this for this lady? She didn't do shit for me. I started to get that resentment. Like, it came back up. It doesn't just go away forever. That's the thing, too, I wanted to point out. Like, if you say today you're going to let go of resentments, whether if it's against yourself or anybody else, don't expect to be like a one and done. This is something that you might still have to continue to remind yourself of. And that's what I had to do when I was there with my mom. Like, I noticed what I was feeling. And instead of allowing that feeling to grow, because that's what happens, it starts to want to multiply and expand. What I did was I utilized my willpower that I do have to deny it and say, nope, there's no place in my heart for this. And I'm not going to treat this woman badly, even though she did what she did to me when I was a child. I'm going to continue to show her my true character. This is me being authentic. Whether this is my mother or somebody else's mother, it doesn't matter. This is an elderly woman who's disabled, who needs help. And so I was able to continue to show her compassion and love, and didn't spit in her food or drop her fork on the floor and step on it and then put it in the plate. I didn't think to do none of that.
Didn't cross your mind?
Did not cross my mind. And that's liberating. And like you mentioned before, it takes the power away from the negative circumstances. And sometimes there's people who want us to continue to suffer. I don't think she did what she did intentionally in a malicious way. She just made bad decisions that severely impacted me. But there are cases where I remember there's people who definitely wished ill upon me. And to this day might still want to see me suffer or see me die. And I can't do nothing about that. I can't get inside of them to rearrange their feelings or their thoughts about me. But what I can do is let it stay with them and not affect me, especially when we're far apart from each other. There are people who hate me today, and they might have a reason to hate me. I made a lot of bad choices myself. I was wrapped up in the gang life and all that. I did a lot of bad things to people, and I'm sure they might still have a grudge. But my side of the street is clean. I don't hate them anymore. And I don't hate myself. And so I'm free from that itself. Whatever it was that happened in the past is in the past. That's not who I am today. And I wish them the same peace that I have. In fact, this was something that I did that my sponsor recommended, and it helped me. And on my knees for 18 months in my early recovery, I prayed for my enemies, for all the people that I hated, that most likely hate me too. I just asked my higher power to give them the same peace that I was seeking. And I did this for 18 months. I'm not a religious person, but I do have a faith in a higher power. But the reason I did it for that long is because I wanted to solidify it in my mind. You see, we can carve new pathways in our brain by repeating activities. And this is what happens when we get addicted. Our addiction doesn't happen just from taking a drug or a substance one time. You don't become an addict the first time you use it. It happens from persistence and frequency of use. And that's how we rewire our brain to think in terms of, oh, this is what we do now. And in the same way, because of that plasticity, we can also restructure our brains to think in terms of like, oh, I let that go. I'm not going to be salty about that anymore. This is not going to rent space in my head anymore. I'm not going to allow this to disrupt my mood. And that is liberating, and it's empowering when you realize that you are in control of your own feelings. And you might not have been able to stop or prevent whatever took place in the past, especially with regard to childhood experiences or just being betrayed by someone you trusted. Those things, they're awful. They feel terrible. But what I realize is it doesn't make any sense for me to continue to hurt myself or allow myself to suffer long after the event has taken place. Like it's over and done with. Why am I still hurting over this? What made more sense to me was to love myself enough to give myself that peace. And by me asking for those individuals to also receive the peace, it also helped me to understand that I like being a compassionate human being. I want other people to have what I enjoy. Now that I'm on this side of life, now that I'm living a good life, I don't wish bad upon other people. But when I was in my addiction, I wanted everybody to burn. I wanted the whole world to be over. I was looking forward to World War III. I wanted everything to come crashing down because I was miserable. Now that I'm not in that mentality anymore, I want good things to happen for everybody. And this is why I love doing this kind of job in this environment, because I have hope for each one of you. I believe that you all can heal, you all can experience triumph and victory that's long lasting. It's for the rest of your life, but it's up to you. You have the key to unlock yourself and set yourself free from whatever's been holding you back. I think this might be a pivotal moment if you decide to start working on this. In the big book of AA, there's a portion here that speaks about resentment. I'd like to share with you guys. This is from page 66 on how it works. It says here, it is plain that a life which includes deep resentment leads only to futility and unhappiness. To the precise extent that we permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile. But with the alcoholic whose hope is the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience, this business of resentment is infinitely grave. We found that it is fatal. For when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the Spirit. The insanity of alcohol returns and we drink again. And with us to drink is to die. If we were to live, we had to be free of anger. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. They may be the dubious luxury of normal men, but for alcoholics, these things are poison. I agree with that. I really strongly agree with that. I think that if we allow ourselves to sit with resentment or even anger, it can be absolutely destructive of our recovery. Because recovery has a lot more to do with being content with your life than just being sober. Like abstaining is one thing. But if you're abstaining from substances and you're absolutely miserable and angry all the time and bitter and salty, how are you going to sustain that? How are you going to stay sober? If you just hate everyone and hate yourself and hate life and hate the world and the government, and then there's just so much stuff to be mad at. Are you going to want to stay sober living like that? I don't think so. And even if a person does maintain sobriety because they're white knuckling it or whatever they're doing, cliff hanging, that's what I call it, and you're just hanging by your fingertips on the edge of a steep cliff, I don't view that as an accurate example of true recovery. True recovery has a lot more to do with a person living the best life that they can possibly live. And that is being healthy, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Those are important things to enjoy so that life becomes more meaningful, so that sobriety is preferable over being under the influence or intoxicated. That's what I realized for myself. The word addiction comes from a mythological figure named Addictus. And Addictus was a slave who had been given his freedom. And he would wander through the city as a free person, but yet he kept his chains on him because he had become so used to having them. He had every opportunity to take off his chains, but he didn't because he had grown so fond of having those chains.
Is that a true story or no?
It's an old myth. It's a mythological figure. In the Roman Empire, they used the term addictus to describe indentured servitude. So if you owed somebody and they took you to court, the judge would declare you an addictus, which meant you had to work for that person until your debt was paid. But I thought that was very fitting because addicts, I think, are in the same predicament. We have every opportunity to be free, but sometimes we grow so fond of our addiction that we prefer it, even though it's unnecessary. And the problem that a lot of people have when it comes to resentment and trauma, I would say, is not that they can't move past it. It's not that they can't heal from it. It's that they refuse to, because sometimes people hold on to their resentment and their trauma because it keeps them warm. It might be a reason to justify maintaining your addiction. It kind of fuels and stokes that flame that burns within, that's consuming you. But yet, it's a position people take. And they say, well, as long as I'm the victim, as long as I have a reason to be pissed off, as long as I have a reason to want to escape, I continue to do what I'm doing. Because really, I just want to stay high. I just want to keep getting drunk and keep getting loaded and have some reason to justify, at least tell myself, even if other people know it's bullshit, at least I can believe my own bullshit, and this kind of makes sense to me. And I think that that's unfortunate. It doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't. But you all have that opportunity, and I hope that you take it and that you do decide to love yourself to the degree that you would be willing to give yourself every opportunity to experience your life at optimal level and realize your own potential rather than denying it to yourself and being your own worst enemy and self-sabotaging and ultimately being the destroyer of your own life. It's nobody else's fault if that's what happens. And it's no one else's right, privilege, obligation, or duty to make things better for you. You have that in your own hands. It's up to you. You decide. What's it going to be? When I began this journey, I realized that, and it was scary. But as I began to move in the direction of taking care of myself and preserving my life, it became empowering. And today I don't feel as frail and fragile and as vulnerable as I did when I walked into these rooms. I now feel like I have a level of strength, inner fortitude, resilience, and confidence that I'm not afraid of what's out there in the world, and I'm not afraid of whatever might come and how other people feel about me and whatever happened in my past. All that stuff doesn't affect me today. I get to live my life the way that I see fit. And I do the things that I enjoy today. And I'm not trying to escape this. I prefer it. All right, guys, let's take a break.